Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm Giulio Panettiere. I come from the South Mediterranean, Sicily Island, and I am completely a newcomer to the field of biosemiotics. I'm a student of anthropology at the University of Oslo, and I would like to thank you very much for welcoming me into this environment. And Yogi, thank you very much for making this possible. Really appreciate this, and I hope. That this presentation, I hope that you will help me because as I conclude my master in anthropology at Oslo University, me and a dear colleague of mine will can't be here today. We are planning, Giacomo, we are planning a paper, we are writing a paper and that is informed by the notion of biosemiotics, and we are here to receive your inputs also in order to make this happen. And I would be very glad to receive some of your inputs. I arrived here because of my master, because of my mentor, because of my supervisor, who some of the people here know very well, and as also been mentioned, is Professor Thomas Hylland Eriksen, whose scholarship has informed and inspired students all over the world. And he passed away recently, and he was a latecomer to the field of biosemiotics. His whole anthropology scholarship has been inspired by the concept of Gregory Bateson, and therefore I've also been inspired by these concepts. And our project was indeed has been having a lot to do with it. And when I discovered about the Society of Biosemiotics, I couldn't help but wanting to be here. So, Professor Eriksen passed away recently. So this presentation is also a tribute to his scholarship, and I know it was very appreciated here as well. So yeah, let's go. Okay, sorry, my presentation is not going to be a presentation full of text. It's going to be visual presentation. These are pictures that I took into the place I've been living for almost 2 years. I came back in May 25. I've been in Fiji, in the Pacific. Thank you very much, Brian, for talking and bringing the Pacific this morning. Thank you very much for providing a ground to talk about anthropology, to talk about ethnography, because this is very much indeed a presentation inspired by ethnography, by my story. You're going to hear a story. There is not a lot of text. I'm going to bring you into a journey to the South Pacific Islands, to Fiji, indeed. This is a corner of a very remote island in the Pacific. What was my initial plan? Why did I reach Fiji in the first place? Well, let me give you a bit of context. Fiji is the first claims to be the first country to be developing a policy on how to relocate communities that are affected by climate change, by sea level rise, and this policy is indeed very much enforced by the government and international partners, international donors that are indeed supporting the relocation, at least supposedly, of communities towards higher grounds. And as you can imagine, this doesn't happen easily. There is a lot of these contents, and my initial intention was to document and understand, indeed, the difference between the theory and the practice, of course, the implementation of such projects. And I moved to a village, one of the first villages to be included in this project of relocation, which is, the official narration is that this place has been a successful case of relocation by the government, but unfortunately it was not the case, because indeed the people in this village claimed, it's a complicated story. I'm not going to give you all the layers because I wanna share a story with you that has a lot to do with biosemiotics, I believe. So, but there are a lot of dimensions, of course, political. We talk about development, we talk about ontologies, and eventually the people in these villages chose not to relocate, not to be relocated. So we're talking. I went to Fiji to study climate mobility and ended up studying in a community that claims to have the case for a climate immobility. And this is the place. This is Vunisavisavi, a place I've been happy to call home for a while. And, so this is a visual presentation. This place, so let me give you another tiny bit of context. This place is a place that cannot relocate, where the sea has been coming inside in the past 15 years, invading the land, creating a lot of issues for the people. Because traditionally, customarily, they don't own a lot of land. So the only land they could use, the people in the village could use to cultivate and to indeed fuel the subsistence needs of the community were inside the village ground, which you can see in this picture, for example. But when the sea started coming inside this place, it became impossible to cultivate because of the salinization of the soil. And this has been affecting the communities on so many levels, affecting, for example, with consequences on their independence from the food source. This is potentially a research on food systems, because people started having less reliance on their food independence, because it's increasingly less possible to cultivate, and trees are dying, as you can see. And it comes with a lot of health issues. It comes with a lot of problems. And eventually, I argue that despite what you were mentioning, Brian, this increasing inclusion in the global economy, the global market, these are communities that up to 15, 10 years ago were not using a lot of cash money. These were subsistence communities that used to live out of what they could produce. Indeed, we're talking about indigenous Itauke communities in Fiji. So there is a grim effect in what this is happening, in the fact that climate change, which we could, and that it has been defined in the past few days as a semiocide, is indeed having on these kind of people, which rely on traditional ways of subsistence, because it's forcing them to be included into the market economy. Climate change is forcing people into relying on goods that they can buy from the market, but it's not creating new job opportunities. So, where does this income come from? People are indeed negotiating very much with this new reality, a new necessarily ontology. So there is very much a connection that we could find between the loss of biodiversity, the coral bleaching that is forcing people to find new sources of food, that they fish less, they can cultivate less, they have to diversify, and it's not always easy. They income, the food production, the everyday life. So there is a connection between the loss of biodiversity and the loss of cultural diversity. And this is exactly what I'm bringing to the table today, a part of what I'm bringing to the table today, and which ends up in being a crisis of the semiospheres, if you want. And but let me tell, now that I've given you a bit of context, let me tell you about something that has happened. The first year that I was in Fiji, the first year that I was in the village, I was learning the language, I was understanding the context, and something were happening, but I felt like I wasn't getting to the core. This was an everlasting feeling, especially when from my small island in the Mediterranean, I arrived into a far island in the Pacific Ocean. There is this feeling of partial alienation initially. It's part of the anthropological process. And till something happened, and I got sick all over. Overnight, I stopped walking. Pain was all over my body. I've always been healthy. I was a rugby player. I was playing in Fiji's home for rugby, and I was happily living also this part of the daily life with the children in the village, etc. Till this couldn't be, and I had to leave the country as soon as possible, as suggested by my doctors, and with my heart broken apart, because I wasn't understanding. Really, I felt there was something happening. I felt there was an interpretation of this disease by the people, but I had to leave. I didn't have time. I was afraid. I was very far. And Fiji doesn't have a great health system, health structure, so I was lucky enough to have a place to go back to and be cured, including this health into this health structure. But and so I had to leave. But I really knew I could feel there was something there that needed to be explored. So in October, I found a way to go back to Fiji. I got some funds to participate into some conferences in Australia, in Oceania, and I managed to go back. And I was right. There was something there that was worth exploring. And it has to do with the fact that being sick, falling sick of this chronic arthritis that was completely new to me, entitled me to hear some knowledge from the people that I was not indeed worth of knowing before. And this has very much to do with an ontological problem, an ontological issue, this local explanation of climate change, this local experiencing, understanding of what this crisis is in this very much local context. And it has to do, well, I should maybe tell you the concept of vanua. Vanua is probably the most important word in the Fijian context. It's a relational word. We can't really translate it. It's place, it's land, but it can also be translated and used as people. So it's indeed a word that speaks about the connections. And when I go back to the country, when I go back to the village, people saw that I was sick and they gave me their explanations. Okay, it was not a scientific bacteria, scientific streptococcus that I took somewhere in the village and that caused this indeed autoimmune crisis in my body. But it was because by living in this particular village, I can't give you so many details. It's a special village. There is a lot of mana. There is a lot of magic. There's a lot of energy in this place. It's a very ancient place that's connected to why the people can't live. It's connected to the perceived notion of Umwelt, right? The reason why staying in this place is more important for them than leaving, no? And indeed, I think that this community is trapped, if you want, in a double bind, because the double bind of climate change, because they know they will lose something by leaving, but they also know that they are losing and negotiating something by staying. But I think that this story, that I can't elaborate more on, it really tells a lot about this instrumental rationality of development hate projects that are often frowned upon communities without including communities, whether they are indigenous or not, into this equal platform of co-designing things, because the Americans arrived into this village, they relocated 5 houses, not understanding the trauma they had left inside the community. Unfortunately, I can't tell you more about this. It's complicated, but let me go back to this perception of Vanua, to the understanding of why this disease had happened. Well, basically, according to this philosopher's friend of mine from the village, this family, which is basically one clan, so it's only one family. By living in the village, I have been exposed to a fracture, indeed, that has been like a curse. It has been cursing this place for a long time. And this is how the people explain this village being more affected than others, than the nearby villages, by indeed the sea level rise, by the intrusion of salt water into the village ground. And I came to know about this genealogical trauma that separate the community, that is affecting the ties, that is basically there's a side of the family who doesn't really belong to the place. It's a complicated story, and I don't and can't give all the details about this. But there is a fracture that goes back into the past of this community, which makes the different units, the different family units of this village, disconnected from each other. And they argue and they fight and they don't talk to each other. But if you will ever visit Fiji, you will notice that there is a very, the Fijian ethos, it's so important. And even in the language, the Fijian language, I find extremely fascinating. Every word is relational. And there is a lot of ethics, which is relational. Ethos is relational. Veilomani, or Nimbula empathy, care. These are core values of a Fijian village to make it work together. Reciprocity, Veindole, we could say. And this, I also visited other communities, and this was not practice. There was a lot of closed doors with locks, people drinking kava, each own on their own porches in their own houses instead of in the community hall. This is very strange. So I indeed knew there was something wrong. And apparently I got caught into this issue, into this trouble. Because as they explain, as they perceive this world climate change, this world sea level rise, if the sea is hitting the land, is hitting the people, the sea is the Vanua, the people are the Vanua. This is like a sort of Raida Nailoilo, they were telling me. Look at the mirror, who's causing it? It's us. We don't blame the sea, we don't blame the West. It's us. It's us letting these crises destroy our bond, destroy our unity that sustains the harmony of this place, that we are causing this problem. That's why climate change is hitting us. It's like rain. It's cleaning us from an issue. It's cleaning us from a problem. It's signaling something that doesn't work. And by living here, by asking these things, by staying with us, you became part of this imbalance. And follow me in this reflection. If climate change it's a sign that comes from the land, Vanua, towards the people, Vanua, it's indeed this immanent conception of land and people hitting itself. And this was not a surprise for the people when I got an autoimmune disease, which is indeed what happens when your body doesn't recognize the threat and hits itself as a way to protect it. And suddenly this became a story of mutual healing, because I realized that I could never heal if this fracture within the families, if this harmony was not restored in the village. And this is an ongoing story. I haven't concluded. I want to go back to Fiji, potentially with a PhD, to explore more of these things. But why am I here? Why am I here talking to you about in a conference Biosemiotics? Because I think that this is indeed a way to document a process of biosemiotic, a way people communicate with their environment, a way people, and in this I think that biosemiotics and anthropology, they really work together. They work hand in hand, because what would happen with an anthropologically inspired biosemiotics? I think we need documentation. I think we need important experiences to form of different experiences of the human, to form a compendium indeed of biosemiotic relations. And this happened again while I was there with the story of the mangroves, the mangrove affair, the mangrove gate, as I like to call it, because indeed you imagine this village as a place that used to be protected by mangrove forest, which was teared down back in the days to secure a parking place for the boats, to secure view. There was a strategic importance in having an open view. But this, as you might realize, this has indeed potentially had an impact in causing this salinization of the soil, this sea intrusion. And as I was in the village, a part of the village, a member, a family unit, started seeing all these mangrove seedlings coming to the sea, coming to shore, and decided to try what would happen if they replanted these mangrove seedlings, restoring this forest that is only on the margins in the village, creating a sort of barrier. Because you should know that this village has been promised a seawall for 10, 15 years by the government. This seawall has never arrived. Funds have arrived, but the seawall has never arrived. The project has been implemented, but nothing has been done. So there is another question that I leave in the parentheses: where are the money going? Is climate change creating the space for capitalist economy to create more capital that is then intercepted by other powers, the old same powers, and not actually received by the communities? Sorry, we close the parentheses. So instead of waiting for this seawall, which is indeed also perceived as an ontological fracture, misconception, because what is a seawall? A seawall is indeed boulders, very heavy boulders that are thrown upon a system. They're not porous. And there is a lot of scientific literature already on this topic. The boulders of a seawall would actually prevent the natural exchange of soil and sediments, causing even more erosion in the long term, in 10, 15 years. It would possibly fix the issue in the next 5 years. It will act as a wave buffer, but it blocks this exchange of sediments and things. So the people also, it's a fixed, fast solution, which doesn't really match with the local perception of time, which is slow, relational. So my mother in the village, Nana Mari, started, let's see, we come to the point, started this process that I like to call of anthropopoiesis, learning how to plant these seedlings, learning how to plant these mangroves, learning from the different seasons, learning from the seedlings that she was planting in this dark stripe. But the mangroves at one point took a turn automatically. And they started flourishing here, but not here. So she's following the natural direction that these mangroves are forming. And including the children, of course, into this act of replantation, which, by the way, is not understood by everybody in the village. So one night, as we were planting mangroves, as she is literally relearning, creating knowledge about planting these seedlings to protect the village, to create this porous barrier that can assure a future for the children who want to keep living in this village, somebody started pulling out these seedlings, and shows that there is indeed a conflict, shows that there is a fracture, shows the context is very much important. Also, not to mention the mangroves act as agent of biosemiotic freedom, right? Of flexibility, semiotic freedom, because they create a nursery for fish. They bring more diversity, they bring more biological diversity in. Sharks go and nest, fish go and nest. It's also, the mangrove is used as a traditional medicine. The people in Fiji mash the seedlings to create a drink that is used to purify when you have stomachache, etc. So there is a purifying agent, there is a purifying component into the mangrove itself. But somebody started not agreeing with it. Somebody didn't agree. But as I understood with time and questions, I stayed in this village, I watched like 15 months. It was part of this genealogical trauma. It was part of this conflict that was happening in the village since a long time ago. And in this sense, it's not that the people didn't agree with the mangrove, but the people didn't agree with each other on what should have been done. But as we tried to have the community meetings, I was acting as something that's called a Downy Vesuso, which is called a mediator, because I was friend to all the family units in the village, and it was very much a story of mutual healing, because I couldn't heal without the community healing. And so we started having conversation. I became this signaling agent towards the people that there was an imbalance, that they should talk again to each other, that it was too long since they had a community meeting 10 years ago in a village of 80 people. Can you realize? So we started, I tried to sorry, it's a wrong term. I tried to suggest that we should actually sit down, Fijian style, and discuss around the kava bowl about what could be done. And the project, this process has started. So the people tried to see this mangrove conflict not as a thing that would erase the connections that will cause even more conflict and issues and troubles, but as something that they could recreate a bond, a sort of ecological suturing with themselves, their past, and their environment. And I think that this tells a lot about a people, a place, a culture that that really experiences and thinks biosemiotically. There is a lot of other things that I would have liked to include in this presentation. I would have liked to have a reflection on this semiocide, which is climate change, which is the relocation of people and their disconnection from their homeworld, from their environment. I feel very grateful for thinking with you. And this is my story. I really brought you an ethnographic piece in becoming. I'm writing my thesis. I'm going to graduate if God wants, inshallah, in December. And I'm open for propositions, for ideas. What could we do with this? How could we write about this biosemiotically? I think there is a clear connection with this amazing field. And my contribution today is really just wanted to bring you a story of people from another part of the world, not weird people, who think biosemiotically, who create these rhizomes with their environment. And perhaps there is something we could all learn from this. Perhaps there is something that we can bring together from this story. And grazie, thank you, Minak. Thank you.
Maybe 2 questions. So, thank you for your ability to express this story. I feel it very well.
Thank you, Nicola.
This is a perfect example of how culture and nature are connected and how this connection is bridged by meaning and magic somehow in its phenomenal expression. And it was a very great story to understand the complexity that connect, for example, climate change, body changing, and agriculture changing, and this phylogenetic history through stories and natures and plants was amazing. It's very cool, and I think from an ecosemiotic perspective, it's really important to expressing this in this place.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I have just a small, I have an idea which is related to my own field of psychotherapy. What you have experienced yourself bodily in your disease from ill, and you describe it as a kind of parallel to the way the body and the land is identified within the language of the Fijian people. This is a self-referential thing that the body is attacked or the land is attacked and it is identified within people as it is happening in the land. So what's your parallel with your own autoimmune disorder in that the body is attacking itself? This is a parallel of self-referential structure, which happens very often in my own field, psychotherapy. What I know about cultural references is that also is explicitly employed or used within African traditional medicine, which the healer is having himself or herself infected contaminated by the disease that is at stake. And I guess it's also happening in other cultures in which the dealer is also getting into the disease himself or herself. This is what I think has happened to you, and that is also what made you included into their culture, so that they open up more towards you. I think it's very important process that has good reciprocity, and I think it is important to look at it also from the perspective of self-referential structure in which you have become part in having this parallel in your own body disease.
Thank you very much, Professor. This is food for thought, incredibly important food for thought.
Sure.
That's Eric.
Well, common narrative about climate change response that there's this kind of homogenization.
Yep.
We have a cosmology of scientific materialism that kind of bulldozes and colonizes other alternative cosmologies. And in the long run, you see increasing decrease of diversity. And I'm wondering, in this case, in their response, if that happens to be the case, or maybe on the contrary, that they're kind of taking in what's happening and it's leading to a change, something new coming about in their worldview and their cosmology, so that it's not a loss of diversity, but it's a new kind of diversity is appearing through the response.
Thank you, Eric. I think it's really the case. I think it's really the case, even if they don't talk about this in these terms. But you see, when we look at a South Pacific context, there is a lot of relations, biosemiotic relations that we can look at and we can track, and they don't need to be validated by science. For example, in this village, in this context, people have custom relations with sharks. I witnessed incredible ways people can communicate and call the sharks. But one example that I would like to bring to you very shortly, and that is indeed a sign of this renegotiation of exchanges, because I think there is new ways that we are learning, new ways, new things, new science interpretation that people are thinking with, interpreting, but isn't the interpretation already a sign of relation anyway? And it has to do with the uto, with the breadfruit. The breadfruit sprout, the breadfruit in Fiji, it's considered a sort of, a sign of cyclones approaching. When there is more than 2 or 3 fruits per branch, people know that this season will probably have a cyclone coming. I stayed in Fiji for 2 years, and both years there was a lot of breadfruit sprouting, and people have been telling me that this has been happening in the past 10 years. There is such an abundance of breadfruit, which is somehow well received because it compensates the inability to cultivate cassava, ondalo, taro, etc. So it's well received. But this year, people were not surprised that there was a lot of breadfruit, and they didn't get ready for the cyclones because it had been 10 years since these breadfruits were so abundant. And this year, without cyclone coming, this year the cyclone struck. I was in the village, and nobody had gotten ready because this is a very remote part of Fiji where even communications are a bit limited. So you see what I'm saying here. I'm saying that the traditional knowledge, these biosemiotic relations between human and the environment are changing. It is a semiocide, it's climate change, it's affecting all these things. But these centuries-old relations, I could make other examples of about how my grandma interprets the wheat to understand what next year will be like in terms of droughts in Sicily. There are a lot of examples possible. But climate change is messing up with this thing. These terms of reference are changing, and we don't know yet how. I believe, because I'm an optimist, as an anthropologist, I feel like I must be, maybe, that we will find new sources of meaning, new signs. We will learn how to reinterpret these relations, but we don't know if this is, or under what terms this is happening.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
We'll be calling him again at 11:30. So,
I need your name, please.
Giulio.
Giulio.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss. I don't know, actually, Miss. Yeah.
Spicy.
Yeah, there is a bit of patchouli in that.
Yeah, every word is relational.
I mean by this that there is in the Fijian language, for example, Fijian language has a simple grammar in the sense that the verb doesn't change. Okay, in the past, in the future, they, me, it doesn't change like in English or in Italian, where every person has a different. But when it's about the personal pronouns, for example, there are different ways to see me and you, me and him. There are so many different pronouns to express me and this person that is here with me. Grazie. Thank you, man. And then me and this person that is not here with me, as if we are two, as if we are many, as if we are a group, as a people. There are so many different examples in this, and every word is relational in the sense that the life is built on these categories of relationality. Everything is. Grazie, bello, grazie mille per il tuo commento, mi ha commosso tantissimo. Grazie. And so it's very. I said that I was touched by his comment, and that so every word in Fiji is this they. They means with, but everything is always, all the verb can be composed with they, and they are rarely used without. So it's always something that we will do together somehow. Something relational. Okay, there's a lot of the ethos I mentioned is really much on this. Veika waitaki means care. Veilomani means mutual love. There are so many words.
See. With the sharks.
It absolutely yes. It's immanent. It's actually taken for granted. Everything in Fiji, it's indeed about the gift, no? So potentially, anthropology and biosemiotics together sign as a gift exchange, because in Fiji, it's all about gifting things to each other. Anyway, I hope this answer. Thank you very much for saying.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.